The Heat are on a roll lately, but should fans be optimistic or skeptic about that success? And with the trade deadline just over a month away, where does Miami need the most help? Is moving Kyle Lowry the answer? All that and more as we answer 5 burning questions on today's Locked On Heat.
Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Got a fun one for you guys today. 5 burning questions. We're going to get to a crazy Kyle Lowry trade idea proposed by Bill Simmons, some trade deadline talk, the budding chemistry between Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro. But let's start with a game of glass half empty, glass half full. We're going to be looking at the Heat's recent stretch. They've won 8 of their last 11 games. They're 20-18, 2 games over 500, currently a game behind the Pacers for 6th place. David, what's your glass half full take on the recent stretch?
Just that they're winning games. I mean, I don't know that we have to go too deeply into that. Like, we're seeing evolution from Bam. We're seeing evolution from Tyler. We're seeing role players step up in a way that they hadn't earlier this season. Maybe that's just because, unfortunately, Dwayne Dedmon hasn't been very effective this season, and he's been missing for most of this stretch. But I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. I think you look at everything that's tied together as well as it has, and I think there's a combination of things. I think people have settled into their roles in a way that they hadn't earlier on. There was a lot of just inconsistency regarding the rotation and whose role was what, but we're seeing everybody kind of fit their role and get more and more comfortable in that. You're getting Cade Vincent back from injury. I don't know. Is there anything else to it other than just things are clicking really well and everybody seems to be on the same page for the first time all season? At least that's what it looks like from my perspective.
Yeah. The health has a lot to do with it, right? You're getting guys back, and Jimmy Butler visiting a doctor in Los Angeles when the team was there, and getting his knee looked at and basically telling reporters this whole regular season is about kind of keeping his knee right. And that kind of feeds into our conversation that we're going to have about Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo stepping up later on in the show. But you're getting the starting lineup back. We saw the preferred starting lineup for the 13th time all season long last night in that win against the Clippers with Caleb Martin in at the starting 4 spot because he had missed a couple games prior to that. But look, the starting lineup has been awesome all season long. So that's sort of my glass half full take, is now that we're seeing guys get healthy and stay healthy for longer, we should be seeing this preferred starting lineup together more going forward. They are outscoring opponents by 8.1 points per 100 possessions in the 13 games that they've played. They have an offensive rating, that starting lineup. They have an offensive rating of 113.6. That would be 11th in the NBA. So right outside that top 10, you compare that to Miami's current rank for the season of 23rd. That's a whole lot better. A defensive rating of 105.5. That would be first in the NBA by a mile. Right now, they're not bad right now. They're top 10. They're 9th in defensive rating, but that starting lineup is a big part of that. And the thing that's most impressive to me is how that starting unit moves the ball. They have an assist-to-turnover ratio of 2.27. Without getting too much into what that is, that's an elite number. That is a bonkers number. That would be first in the league, again, by a mile. They're 10th right now. This is a team that moves the ball well regardless of who's out there. But going from, top, 10th in the league to first by a mile, that's a huge difference. And that's, again, in large part, due to that starting lineup, why they're even 10th. Like, they move the ball so well. Their rebounding rate is not good. Their true shooting percentage is average, but they get it done on both ends, and they move the ball really well. They move their feet, and they switch everything really well defensively. It's just a heavy movement team, that starting lineup, and it's a lot of fun to watch, too, which is sort of my half glass full take there, is that, hey, when that starting lineup is there, they are outscoring opponents by a wide margin, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this in our recap of the Clippers win, but that first half of Heat basketball was as good a half as we've seen in a while. Like, everything was just moving so crisply, smooth. the offense was clicking, and that was just a thing of beauty. The defense is at another level, and they're symbiotic in that sense, right? The defense feeds the offense and vice versa. And it just makes for really beautiful basketball. And that's something absolutely that Heat fans should be able to appreciate over this recent winning stretch.
One other thing, too, glass half full wise, the bench is starting to come together as well. This is a bench that ranks 26 in net rating overall, so one of the worst 5 in the league. And that's the current ranking right now. But you look at that net rating since Victor Oladipo came back on December 7th, they have the 12th. They're 12th in net rating. That bench. The bench is 12th in net rating overall. Unbelievably better. If you go beyond net rating and just like raw plus minus, they have the 19th ranked bench in the league. Since Victor Oladipo has come back, that has gone up to 13th. So either way, whatever way you slice it, one of the worst benches in the league to a above average unit when Victor Oladipo is in there. And that's all this bench is going to be. I don't think that this bench has a ceiling of being elite. I think this bench has a ceiling of being above average. But if you get your starting lineup back and they're outscoring opponents at that clip, and then your bench is above average to above average, that's a recipe for winning. Here's my glass half empty take on this. And I don't want to linger too much on it, but it is worth pointing out. Again, the Heat have won 8 of their last 11 games. But during that stretch, their point differential just plus 2.9, right? They're only beating teams by a hair under 3 points per game on average during that stretch. It's good. It's a whole lot better than where Miami's point differential was prior to it and on balance for the entire season. But it's not amazing, right? And you look at a stretch where you're winning 8 of your 11, you would think, oh, wow, this team is really putting it together. Maybe they're getting some dominant performances. Not so much. They haven't really dominated anybody during this stretch in a meaningful way. I think the most dominant they've looked is probably against a shorthanded Lakers team that that stinks, and they get dominated by a lot of teams. But they've been good. They've been good. They just haven't been amazing, which is sort of like cheating my half glass empty take because I'm still saying they look good. They just don't look amazing the way that maybe a team that wins 8 of their last 11 could potentially look.
I think that's fair, and I agree with you. I think that's the right perspective of this, is that as good as they've been, as much as they've found keys to winning consistently over this recent stretch, and they're getting some contributions from players that hadn't been available or just have been missing because of injury or things of that sort, it's all tying together. The reality is they're still not a dominant, great team that can just club you over the head and overpower you on your way to victory. We saw that yesterday. They looked fantastic in that first half, and then in the third quarter, immediately sacrificed a 20-point lead. And that's, indicative of what this team has been, that they have to constantly work for everything. As good as their defense has been, the prolific nature of the three-point shot in today's NBA makes every lead, no matter how great it might be, very, very tenuous at best. And especially when you don't have that kind of incredible offensive engine that can overpower an opponent. And Miami just doesn't have that. They got a great performance from Bam. They've got really good shooting from Tyler Herro. We know what Jimmy is, but they don't have that one player that's going to go out and just drop 40 on you and just leave an opponent helpless. And that's part of the problem, is that every Miami Heat game, not just victories, but even defeats, is we're right there. We're very close. And you never know what's going to happen. They're just not good enough, unfortunately, to overpower opponents. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, look, you can appreciate that style of basketball. That's also just the reality of who this team is.
I would say there is something wrong with it if you want to win long term. I think you just it would be so nice to have a lot
of success being this same team ever since Jimmy Butler joined this group.
Fair enough, but they also have not won a championship, which is the stated goal of this organization. And it takes everything they have. I know you don't care about championships, but it takes everything that they have to win at the rate that they have won at. It would just be so nice if you had like a Kevin Durant where you could just roll the ball out and he could just mid-range his way and just glide his way to 43 points and just dominate a game entirely. Like the Heat just don't have that. But look, the third quarter thing has been real. Like if we want to be even more specific about this, like you alluded to, like they got to fix the third quarter problems. And this has just been an ongoing issue for the team this season and even in previous seasons, although sometimes I think it has been overstated.
But we keep getting questions and comments from people. And I have my theories. I think
quickly,
they're not
20-second theory on your theory on 20 seconds on your theory on the third quarter.
They're not good enough. They come out with a great sense of energy and purpose in the first half, and other teams respond better because, again, Miami's talent disparity isn't great to overpower an opponent.
It goes to the hangover aspect that this team has openly talked about, and I do think that sometimes they just take their foot off the gas to start these third quarters. And you have opponents like, and the Heat are an average basketball team by their record, and so if they're winning at halftime, and then you get an opponent that comes in and says, "Hey, we got to come out of halftime, make some adjustments, and make a push," that's just sort of what happens. But Miami, I don't mind the push so much as Miami giving up the leads. Like if a team comes out and goes on a 12-2 run, just try to stymie that run. The Heat need to figure out a way to sort of just stymie the run before it gets out of hand, before they lose a lead completely the way they did against the Clippers and other times this season too. But we are going to talk about a interesting Bill Simmons trade proposal, a Kyle Lowry trade idea that he came up with on a recent podcast. I'm going to tell you why I hate it, David, but we're going to get to that after the break. First, tell the listeners about BetOnline.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net, still your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college football, college basketball, and whatever sport you're looking for. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. And we're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We are available wherever you get your podcasts, Monday through Friday, as well as on YouTube. Bill Simmons proposed a trade idea on a recent podcast. Let's just read it. Here, where do I have it? Okay. 3-team trade involving the Toronto Raptors, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Miami Heat. Bill Simmons has the Raptors in this trade getting D'Angelo Russell, Heat rookie Nikola Jovic, and a first-round pick, a 2023 first-round pick from Miami. So that's what the Raptors get. The Timberwolves get Kyle Lowry in this deal, and the Heat get Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. in the trade. David, do you like it, love it, or hate it?
Like it, love it, or hate it. No, I've got to say I hate it. I don't like this deal for any team, but especially not for Miami. Giving up on Jovic this prematurely seems like really rash, including a first-round pick. As much as I don't really put that much value into a mid-first-round pick, which is likely what it will be, I also think you want to be able to retain that. We talked about yesterday's episode how on the wake of a 71 performance for Donovan Mitchell, like Miami just didn't have the assets to consummate a trade like that. Well, you don't trade them for a player like Fred VanVleet, who's having an off year, and a player like Gary Trent Jr., who's a nice player, but I don't know one that's necessarily going to change the outcome of this season for Miami. So keep those assets for when you really need them. And again, I don't think the problems with Kyle Lowry, I've talked about this before. I think they're overblown by the Heat fan base. I'm not sure what they expect Lowry to be able to do. I know he struggled on some nights. I know he's missed time because of personal reasons, but he's also been very, very good. And until recently, I think that was pretty obvious. So trading him and his high-level defense at this point in the season seems, again, like a really short-sighted move to be made for this front office.
Yeah, you really got to love Fred VanVleet if you're the Heat's front office in a meaningful way. And look, I love Fred. Like, there's nothing wrong with Fred VanVleet. Undrafted
player, right? That's the MO for this roster. Let's get as many undrafted as possible.
Coming off of an all-star season, his numbers are down this year, but I think he's probably closer to what he was as an all-star than he has been this year. I think that's probably accurate. I hate this trade for Toronto. I don't really know why. This is a slam dunk for the Timberwolves, by the way. All they have to do is give up D'Angelo Russell for Kyle Lowry in this fake trade. Like, Kyle Lowry, say what you will, is a superior player to D'Angelo Russell. But you brought this up before we started recording, David. Like, the Timberwolves are receiving Kyle Lowry in this trade. Theoretically, Kyle Lowry is exactly what they need. A leader in the locker room, on the court, can get them organized, all these things. You listen to one Timberwolves broadcast, by the way, on League Pass, and all they say is, boy, could we use a real point guard? Like, that's all they talk about, which is not, that's shade to D'Angelo Russell, obviously, too. But
and Anthony Edwards, too,
to a degree as well. But to only give up D'Angelo Russell, D'Angelo Russell and get a guy like Kyle Lowry back is a steal. Lowry is a superior player to D'Angelo Russell. But also, like you pointed out, that's the idea of Kyle Lowry that you're getting back, not necessarily the Kyle Lowry that you're getting back. You need somebody that wants to be there, that's going to be happy to be there. I'm not sure Lowry getting put into that situation. He might respond very much in the same way Jimmy Butler did when he went into that situation, which TLDR did not go well for Minnesota. The Raptors, meanwhile, they're getting D'Angelo Russell, Nikola Jovic, and a first-round pick for their all-star point guard, and Gary Trent Jr., who on the open trade, like maybe he's got that player option for next year at 18.5, some scuttle that he might opt out and try to find something more. If they're going to move on from Gary Trent Jr., I think you can get something of value from him or for him on the trade market without having to upend your entire starting backcourt. And look, I love Nikola Jovic. I don't think he's proven to be an asset on the trade market. I don't think that. Sure. I think that's fair. And then a first-round pick from Miami that's going to end up like number 18, 20, 23, something like that. Like, what do the Raptors care for that? They want win now moves. Like the Raptors are trying to take that next step, I thought. Not something like this where they just get another middling first rounder. So in terms of the Heat's perspective, am I okay with trading Kyle Lowry just as a overall concept? Look, I think that there is something to be said about the fact that, hey, the more that this team shifts their offense towards Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo, again, we will get to that specifically later on, but the more they do that, especially recently, David, the less and less useful Kyle Lowry appears to be on the court. He's a guy that needs the ball in his hands. And the Heat never say that. They say, hey, he can affect the game whenever he's on the court defensively, what he provides. All that stuff is true. But I also just wonder, like, there's some diminishing returns with Lowry there. Like, that catch-and-shoot three-pointer is not where it used to be. His three-point shot in general is not where it used to be. But that catch-and-shoot stuff has not been great this season. He needs that shot to fall if he's going to be a threat off the ball. And it just hasn't this year. Defensively, he's still good, but he's not what he used to be either. And so if you're looking to trade Kyle Lowry because you say, okay, look, we're going to shift our offense more towards the Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo, pick and roll type of stuff, that makes Lowry a little bit less, we don't need him as much anymore to get us organized offensively because we have this new organizing principle in the Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo two-man game. I wouldn't be looking for another point guard because to me, my point guard is basically Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo, and obviously Jimmy Butler can do some playmaking. I would actually look to trade Kyle Lowry for some front court help and not just another younger version of him in Fred VanVleet. So in terms of this trade, I'm going to answer my own question. I hate it. But that kind of flows nicely into our next conversation, which is where do the Heat need help at the deadline? What do you think?
Unpopular opinion. I don't think they need any help. I think they've got their big midseason trade with the recent immersion of Victor Oladipo. Like this version of him is the offseason acquisition or the midseason acquisition that you're looking for. Yes. Like you're just not going to get a player at this point that I think is going to continue to improve Miami's chances, that you're not going to have to either sacrifice a role player that can come up. And this is part of the problem with this roster construction is that you're dependent on these undrafted, untalented or low talented players to be able to step up on any given night. We saw this against the Clippers. You need a big night from Max Strus. You need those 9 points from Duncan Robinson. You need whatever you can get out of Orlando Robinson. Is it a perfect recipe for success? No, but it's the reality of who this team is. And I don't think you're going to be able to package a collection of canned goods for a 5-star meal. Like that just doesn't seem realistic. You're not going to get that kind of role player that's going to make this team so much better. That's going to raise this season's ceiling significantly. And so, I could say flatly, yeah, sure. Yeah. You need more size, right? You need a 4. You need a good quality, better backup than Orlando Robinson at the center position. Are you going to find those things? Maybe it's over Yurtseven, maybe it's not. So that's where I'm at. I think you could get a 4. But Caleb Martin's been great too. Like, I don't know that you want to necessarily say, you know what, thanks for doing yeoman's work for 5 months and growing, but we're going to go ahead and send you to the bench now because we acquire X player.
I'm with you. I don't think that the starting lineup needs any alterations. Like we just got done talking about how good it is, right? To me, it's the bench that you need to figure out and just some of the depth pieces. I think you start with 2 questions. Where do we need help and how can we acquire that help? To your point, the second question is much more difficult to answer than the first question. But we're only asking the first question here. That's Andy Ellsberg and Pat Riley and their job to figure out this. Adam Simon, like that's their job to figure out the second part. But I do think that the Heat obviously need front court help. Like we love Orlando Robinson in these parts, but he only has 23, 24 games left on this 2-way contract. Unclear if the Heat are going to be able to even promote him onto the regular roster. There might be ways around it. You trust Andy Ellsberg might have a plan for that, but who knows? So. Like long-term, Dwayne Dedmon, he's missed the last 7, 8, 9 games, something like that. You can't rely on him for health. Omer Yurtseven, who knows what the deal with him is right now. So I do think this team needs another player in the front, a rotation piece in the front court. Somebody that could play power forward potentially behind Caleb Martin or obviously the 5, or maybe a tweener, just some big body to provide some sort of emphasis on the glass, in the paint, defensively, all these things. They need a guy. They need somebody. I just don't know how they get that somebody. But to me, that's what I'm looking at. If you're going to make a huge shakeup move and you're going to try to trade Kyle Lowry or put together, some contracts between Duncan Robinson and Victor Oladipo and Dwayne Dedmon, whatever, you stack some of these other smaller contracts together with some draft picks, whatever the answer is to that, I think that the target, the need that they need to target is in the front court. That's just where and so the other part of it too is they need some 3-point shooting. Unless you really think that Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, like these guys are going to come around in a meaningful way between now and the playoffs, I think you also need to go out and try to address the 3-point shooting issue because it's a big one. But that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at 3-point shooting off the bench. And I'm looking for front court help off the bench. Just raise the floor.
Right there, right? Jay Crowder's right there.
Raise the floor. I said 3-point shooting, David. I don't think you heard me. Good, not streaky, the consistent 3-point shooting. The Heat have streaky 3-point shooting. They got plenty of that already.
Legend Jay Crowder. This is what you get for not covering the team during that stretch. You didn't get to appreciate Crowder the way I did. He was great in that locker room. But anyway,
they got to raise the floor on the bench. Is my point. Raise the floor on the bench a little bit.
I will just say this, and this is kind of just for the sake of our listeners and our fans. I think that this is going to be one of the busiest, if not the busiest, trade deadlines that we've seen because there's so much parity in the league. I made this point
league-wide
last night's Locked on NBA. Yeah, league-wide. There is so much parity. You've got these teams all bunched up 1 through 12 on every side of the conference. You've got very few teams that are really that bad, like Detroit on one side, maybe the Lakers on the other. But even then, the Lakers probably still see themselves as a playoff option. Having said that, who's going to be the buyer? Who's going to be the seller? I think there's going to be a lot of activity. Maybe it's just moving deck chairs, a phrase that you like to use. But either way, I think there's going to be a lot of activity. I don't think there's going to be any activity from the Miami Heat. I'm just putting that out there. I don't think they're going to make a move. And I know that's kind of killing some of the enthusiasm from some of our fans that are very interested in trading Kyle, trading Jimmy, trading Bam, trading everybody, and getting ex-superstar. I don't think any of that's going to happen. I don't think there's going to be a move to be made on this roster. I think they're kind of stuck, and I think they're going to move forward with that until the offseason and see if they can upgrade the roster on that at that timeline, not necessarily during or mid-February.
I agree and I disagree. I don't think a major shakeup trade is going to happen until the offseason. I do think a move will be made before the deadline. I think the Heat will find some way to get something done, even if it ends up just being trading KZ Okpala to the Thunder like they did last year, or wherever they traded him. Like, so I don't
trading. Who's KZ in this case?
I don't know.
Baxter's?
I have no idea. I don't know. It's just we could guess all we want. I've seen this Heat front office figure out ways to do something in some way. Maybe it's just freeing up a roster spot to promote Orlando Robinson. Like, it could be something that minor, that simple, but
maybe they'll trade for Dwayne Wade. Who knows?
I'd be down. Why not? They could do some scoring off the bench.
I'll never forget that. Just as an aside, I'll never forget the shock at seeing that tweet come through from Wojnarowski.
For a second-round pick. For a second-round pick.
Conveyed.
That never conveyed. Can I give you one name before we go to break here that is... It's half-baked. I'm not sure I want it to happen, but it's a name that I've been thinking a lot about.
As long as it's not Jared Vanderbilt, right? That's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. Nikola Vucevic. The Bulls got to do something. The Bulls have to make a decision with him.
Don't get me started on Vooch.
I'm throwing it out there. He would address a major need on the boards, rebounding-wise. He could space the floor defensively. It's not great, but I think the way Miami plays defense and how great the other defenders are around him, they could cover up from some of those shortcomings the way that Chicago Bulls cannot, given that their best 3 players are bad defenders. And the role players aren't all that great either, except for Alex Caruso. So it's just a name that it's like 18 million or something. It would be like Duncan Robinson and a pick or something like that. I don't really know what it would take to get Nikola Vucevic, but it's just, or maybe it's like 20 million. I don't know. It's in the ballpark where the Heat can make contracts work. And it's something that I've just been toying with. I'm not sure I'm in on it.
He's an expiring.
That's what I'm saying. The Bulls have to make a decision. And if they're 16-21 right now, currently out of the play-in tournament, it feels like that's. I wrote this for the Step Back a couple weeks ago. Like, what are you even doing, Chicago? If you could recoup anything, you're not going to get what you traded for him in that Magic deal, but that's a sunk cost. You got to at least approach it that way for the Bulls. But if you can recoup anything for him, as opposed to just letting him walk in free agency. I don't know. Yeah. I just feels like something's got to give there.
He negotiates a buyout, right? Could he negotiate a buyout?
He could, but I don't see him doing that. I don't think he's unhappy.
No, well,
he would just play out he would just play out the season and become a free agent. You don't really see buyouts like that. Like the Bulls are still.
Yeah, but he's killing his value. He's killing his value. They're not going.
He's actually played pretty well lately. He had a game winner the other night. All right, I didn't want to do a whole Vucevic thing. Let's talk more about the players that are on this team. Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo, and why that two-man game, the way that it has evolved, that could put some decisions on the front desk or on the desk of some Miami Heat decision makers. That's coming up next here on Locked On Heat. Reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram. Email us at lockedonheat@gmail.com. All right, we got 5 burning questions here. This next one. Have Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro proven that they should be the engine of Miami's offense and not Jimmy Butler? David, before you answer, I've got some interesting numbers here provided by our friend Cooper Moorhead. Bam and Tyler Herro, that pick and roll combination is producing an average of 1.14 points per possession. That's
pretty good.
Number 8. It's elite. It's number 8 among high volume combinations in the league. I had a Twitter thread about this Tuesday morning, just sort of breaking down how the Heat used that Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo two-man game early in that Clippers game and ultimately to win that Clippers game. It has become, I think, the fulcrum of Miami. Not I think, it has become the fulcrum of Miami's offense. Their their first 2 plays of the game against the Clippers were Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro pick and roll, and they just, every time the offense stalls a little bit, you could see Spoelstra calming the team down and instructing them to get into that set. It is their bread and butter right now in offense. We talked about how it's not so much Kyle Lowry. It's not even so much Jimmy Butler anymore. Jimmy Butler's going to find a way to get his 26 and 6 every single night, right? Like he's just going to do it. But he can do that off the ball, cutting, doing all the Jimmy Butler things that we love from him. But Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro, that two-man game has been so important. And I'm wondering if we should just now start to consider this the engine to Miami's offense. And if that's true, David, where does that leave the Heat and where do they go from here?
Well, I think they've already turned over the offense to that, right? As you're pointing out, it's basically been their bread and butter. And I think it's been very effective as Coop's statistical evidence proves. My concern is that you're marginalizing 2 highly paid veterans that are in some ways the backbone of your team, at least spiritually, right? The emotional barometer for that locker room is Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry. I don't know that you can afford to just say, well, you kind of have to just sit back, be a little bit more passive and wait until Tyler and Bam kind of directs the ball towards you, right? Isn't that the threat possibly?
I think everything can just be triggered out of the Bam and Tyler pick and roll. It doesn't necessarily mean that Bam is finishing the play or Tyler is pulling up for a shot off of a screen. It could lead to Jimmy Butler making that baseline cut when Tyler finds Bam. Bam's on the short roll. And then Jimmy, he loves that little dunker spot under the basket where it gives him that easy cut. And Bam can just feed him. Tyler Herro has found Jimmy Butler in those positions too a couple of different times. I think they could do more of it. But that's sort of what I'm talking about is the evolution of it. Instead of, hey, Jimmy, here's the ball, entry pass into the post, dribble, fade away, jumper. And by the way, that works a lot for Jimmy Butler. He's awesome at that bully ball stuff. But I also think that maybe turning Jimmy Butler not into a complimentary player, but that's not fair. But like I said, he always finds ways to get to his spots, get his buckets. I think that if you pair Bam and Tyler together and then you stagger Jimmy with Kyle, you know, Jimmy's still going to get to that bully ball stuff that he likes, some of that slower pace stuff, but Jimmy is a very slow paced player. Naturally, when he's controlling the ball, the offense slows down. With Bam and Tyler, it's not moving at a breakneck speed, but it's moving a lot faster and in a very physical.
It's more dynamic.
And you can see it, right? It looks more dynamic, it looks more physical. You're getting everybody involved, I think, in a way that Jimmy, he's unselfish, but it's sort of like dribble out 10 seconds from the shot clock and then pass to somebody. It doesn't really feel like swing everywhere all the time with him.
And where does this leave the offense in the postseason, though? Like, I mean, you're talking about when things slow down, when teams can scheme out a little bit differently and target what Miami is able to do well. I think that's the problem, is that if you start turning things over to Bam and Tyler, I'm more likely to think that teams will be able to defend that more effectively in the postseason than they do during the regular season, when it's something that they weren't expected. But over the course of a 7-game series, they'll be able to scheme it out, mitigate the success rate, and then eventually you'll just wind up turning the ball over to Jimmy and letting him go to work, which is, again, what Miami has done over the past few postseasons, and it's worked with the exception of that series against the Milwaukee Bucks. So I don't know. I'm
well,
sure
what you're hinting at, though, is, I mean, it's not that this is black and white, and we shouldn't talk about it that way, and it's a good point. Like, this is all gray area. And what the Heat, and to kind of go back to my last question, where does this leave the Heat and where do they go from here? It's finding the right balance of, hey, we get to our offensive triggers from this Bam and Tyler pick and roll, but when we have to, we need to get Jimmy Butler these possessions in the post and slow it down and let him do bully ball, let him do some of that ISO mid-range stuff that he's so good at. And finding that balance is how the Heat are going to have greater success in the playoffs than they've even had in previous years. Because remember, Jimmy Butler carried this team on basically one leg to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Tyler Herro was not great in that series. Bam in the playoffs. Bam Adebayo was very up and down in the postseason. Mm-hmm. So this Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro pick and roll is more for them, I think, in elevating their games and accentuating where it is that they've developed this season. And I think their development has been very, very real for each of them. Finding a way to accentuate their strengths and get them easy offense and rhythmic offense. Because we just know Jimmy was going to figure it out. Jimmy could get into a rhythm. All Spo has to say is, hey, Jimmy, get in a rhythm. And Jimmy's like, great, I'm in a rhythm. Let's go. Like, he could figure it out. It's finding that balance so that all three of them are firing the way that they need to fire, as opposed to just one of them in the postseason, which we've seen, as great as Jimmy Butler can be in the playoffs, that has a hard ceiling.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? Like, you're talking about finding success in the playoffs, how teams can scheme things differently in order to cut out what you do well. Having that versatility as an option, whether you can go to Jimmy, whether you can go to have Kyle running the point more effectively, or just doing things differently with the ball in his hands, or running the two-man game between Bam and Tyler. You want that kind of optionality to keep opposing defenses at bay. You can't just go with one thing. It doesn't work. Your team's not talented enough. I don't think any team in the league this year is that talented where they can just keep running the same thing over and over again. It just doesn't work. We even saw that in the finals last year. You had to have big performances from other players. You have an all-time historic great in Steph Curry, and yet somehow you need Andrew Wiggins to step up his game in order to carry your team to a finals victory. Having said that, I don't have any problem with Jimmy taking a back seat and being able to take things over, because that's who he is. That's what he's done. He's always been able to read the game and determine exactly what's necessary of me. But I will say the difference in this is that you absolutely need his buy-in. Previously, that was by his choice. He was like saying, you know what, let me go get Tyler going. Let me get Duncan going. Let me get whomever going. And then I'll step up when it's necessary. Then I'll take over when I'm required to do so.
I think Jimmy likes this, right? I mean, how many times?
I don't know about that. I wouldn't go that far.
How many times in post-game press conferences has he basically said, I don't want to have to do everything?
Yeah, I don't buy that either. Like,
I kind of do, based on the fact that he doesn't
want that kind of option to save your knees, and because maybe you fear that you're not capable of carrying.
That's what I think it comes
for 82 games during the regular season, and that's fine. But I think he's Jimmy Butler. Like, he's a top 10-ish player in the league. Yeah. He wants the ball in his freaking hands. He doesn't want to just turn the keys over to Tyler.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Again, we're not talking about this in a black and white way. Like, Jimmy Butler's going to get his touches. He's always going to get his points.
Well, I want him. I just want more clarity in terms of what I'm telling, as we're talking about this shift in the offense, that's all fine and good in theory. But as far as our listeners are concerned, it's like, oh, he doesn't pass the ball to Bam. He's just too one-dimensional, whatever their complaints might be. He's still the straw that stirs Miami's drink, and he's going to be their best player for the next year or two until Bam eventually takes that leap, or Tyler takes that leap, or Jimmy suffers some catastrophic injury or something along those lines. He has to be the one to say, you know what? I can't run this anymore. Time to turn the offense over to somebody else. And I don't think he's there yet.
It reminds me a little bit of like the LeBron, Anthony Davis stuff, where LeBron is very deferential to Anthony Davis in the regular season, knowing that if they get to the playoffs, which is a big if now, but the idea at least being, if and when we get to the playoffs, I'm LeBron James and I can take over. I do wonder if Jimmy Butler looks at it that way. Hey, like, look, my knee is not where I want it to be. I need to stay fresh for the playoffs because that's all I care about.
This is Dwayne 2014-15, right? And then we see him like not meshing necessarily with Goran Dragic. And I know you've got Chris Bosh, not necessarily at the same level, and he winds up missing half the season because of a career-ending injury. But I kind of see that, like, Dwayne is Dwayne, and and he wants to be the guy that carries this team single-handedly, and he couldn't be that guy anymore.
So
it takes some self-awareness.
I think Jimmy Butler has it. I think you and I disagree on this.
You
personally, do you like this shift in the offense, short-term, long-term, however? We very quick on this, but do you like it?
I think it's what's necessary to make your team different. You can't. We talked about this all season. We talked about, you know what you're going to get from Jimmy, but I don't know that you're going to continue to be able to get that from Jimmy. It's a huge assumption to hang your season, your hopes, everything on 30-something-year-old Jimmy Butler continuing to do what he did at a historic level last season. And so you want to be able to have some kind of different dimension to what your team can do. And if this is the case, then so be it. It's just, look, man, players, especially superstar players, even superstar players that put on their hard hats from day one when they joined the Chicago Bulls, they don't like sacrificing like that. They're not so apt to just say, you know what, I'm okay being put out to pasture to some degree, or not being the man that runs this team. Like, that's Jimmy Butler pissed his way out of Philadelphia, Minnesota, and Chicago because he didn't like everybody else stepping up to help him up enough. And at the same time, reminding everybody on the way out on all three stops, he's still the guy who makes this team as good as they can be. I don't want to upset Jimmy, and he's still too good a player at this point where he shouldn't just be marginalized without his buy-in.
He averaged 14.5 shots per game last year. He's averaging 13.8 this year. That's 0.7 fewer shots per game. I don't know that that's enough to call what's been happening marginalizing Jimmy Butler. This is not a guy who routinely takes like 22 shots in a game.
Too. You're right. But we haven't seen.
It is new. This burgeoning, this burgeoning chemistry between Bam and Tyler is new. I just think as a trigger to get to the rest of your offense, and that could ultimately lead back to Jimmy Butler in the post and doing these things. I like it, and to me, I'm looking long term. Bam and Tyler are going to be here for a long time. You need them.
Jimmy.
This budding Jimmy Butler is going to be here for a while too. Yeah, but like in order to
$50 million
maximize whatever
this complimentary role player, I don't know.
I'm not saying he's a role player. I think you're kind of honing in on the like.
Reading into it? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's a role player thing. I just think that Bam and Tyler are doing the pick and roll stuff, the 2-man game, and I think there's a balance. And I'll go back to what I said before. The next step for the Heat. The ceiling for this team is going to, or I'm sorry, the window for this team stays open as long as Bam and Herro continue to get better. And you take a little bit more and more off of Jimmy's plate every year. If you want to win a championship, that's the formula. Not just riding Jimmy Butler like you do in the playoffs every single year. That's not the formula to win ultimately a championship. So if you do have the buy-in from Jimmy Butler to do this, then this is the formula. And by the way, if you don't have the buy-in, so be it. This is just this is what the Heat have to do long term. I'm sorry, but this is it.
That's a dangerous game. Where you're paying him $50 million and no one's taking that contract on. You're going to have to find a way to coexist and make it.
And that's the next step for the Heat, is making sure that there is a balance between the way that Jimmy wants to play and Bam and Tyler. And like I said, it's not like Bam and Tyler are going out with a pace of 104 every single night and just playing like one of the they're not. It's still a slow plodding kind of methodical game. There is a nice way, and the way that the Heat have been playing lately offensively, it looks pretty good. I think that first half against the Clippers was a perfect example of what this should and could look like. Last thing, Haywood Highsmith has his contract fully guaranteed on January 10th. That is a week from today. Knowing that the Heat are up against the luxury tax and that Haywood's spot might be the only sort of fungible roster spot here, has he done enough to warrant keeping that spot, keeping in mind now, David, that you keep him past this January 10th fully guaranteed deadline, you're pretty much locked into what this group is, barring some pre-deadline type of deals. And then, maybe like the last month of the season, you're talking about adding guys on 10 days, but that's not very important. So, Haywood Highsmith, has he done enough? Quick answer, because we're running up against it.
Yes.
Yeah, he has. Great. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. Now make your second listen game-to-game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game-to-Game covers every game across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game-to-Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining me, David.
Fungible. What a word.
I learned it last year.